Hi there, welcome to the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. Now on tonight's chopping board, we're looking at government's enormous and growing expenditure. And we're asking ourselves if indeed this is a path to debt and distress, or it's a path to growth and goals. And I have two guests that are going to help me sift through all the jargon and make you and I better informed. My first guest in studio, Nana Osei Bonsu, he's the CEO of the Private Enterprise Federation, PEF. And Dr. Richmond Atuahene, he's a financial consultant. He's also the CEO of Salman Partners and Financial Consult Limited. He I spoke to earlier on today and will share his insights with you. And then we'll continue our conversation with Nana Osei Bonsu. We'll be looking at issues that came out of the mid-year review, particularly on the issue of expenditure and whether we should be wary of government's growing expenditure and other issues that came out, the taxes that they've placed on products that you and I will have to demand whether we like it or not, and the financial sector cleanup. Finance Minister said it's going to cost us in total about 21 billion Ghana cedis. That's between $3 and $4 billion. And we ask ourselves, is this the end? Well, some of my guests disagree with that. But let's listen to Dr. Richmond Atuahene, financial consultant, and he's going to share his insights on the mid-year review and what came out of it. So the finance minister came to Parliament on Monday. He presented his mid-year review. He's asked us for more money and he's given us more taxes. Now he planned to spend 78 billion for 2019, and now he's asked for 6 billion extra, and he's going to spend 84 to 85 billion Ghana cedis. Now, to the uninformed, somebody will say the finance minister is spending too much. What will you say?
Thank you very much. I think that he should have stayed within what he has done earlier rather than going for, because the economy is not really seeing growth at all. Times are very hard. If you ask businessmen and if you ask them, times are very hard. So I would have thought that financial discipline, he should have stayed, at least stay within what originally he presented. It looks to me that it's too aggressive. The reason why I'm saying that, none of the targets set in the first half was achieved. So I'm wondering what informed decision has he gotten that he's changed that to grow it further than. So I would have advised him to have stayed within what he had earlier and see if we can achieve the taxes to be able to come near the difference between the expenditure and the policy that he's setting up around.
He makes the argument that the energy contracts, the power purchase agreements, the take or pay has reduced the room that he has for spending. So this is one of the reasons why he needs more, because it's taking up most of the money we are raising through revenue, tax revenue and tax revenue. What would you make of that argument?
Well, how long has it, is it the third budget he has made?
Yes, 2017-2020.
Why didn't he talk about this the first day? Now we have lost $500 million, multiplied by whatever rate. It means we've lost about $1.5 billion of revenue. Why is he talking about it now and he never talked about it the last time? Is it negligence or what? I thought that the take and pay, if immediately you came into power, that should have been the first review you should have done. It is too late for us to come now to say that because of that you're tight. I would have thought that being very proactive, she should have done that earlier. So now he's coming back, I haven't done that, can you let me do this? What assurances do we have that we can generate the revenue that he anticipates? That's where my problem is. I don't want to seem that a prophet of a doom. The borrowing is becoming quite unbelievable. I mean, we started from 122, today we are 204 billion. To me, it's too astronomical. The predecessor started with 95 billion. He came to 122 billion for the period of 8 years. And then we're talking about only 3 years. We are close to 80 billion. To me, we are running too much.
The issue of debt keeps on coming up, Doc. Some make the argument that due to the rigidities in the system, the fact that most of the revenue is taken by wages and salaries, interest payments and grants to the government units, the Dischargeable Common Fund, the GET Fund, etc. So therefore, we need to borrow. And if this borrowing is being used for projects that will pay for themselves, then what's the issue? Unless we're not using the borrowing for the right stuff. That's what the problem is. What do you make of that?
You see, I'll give you a history. In 2008, 2007, when Ghana borrowed the first debt, 750 billion, would you care to know that after the change of government, 60% were used for salaries, public sector salaries?
And how do we justify this?
How do we justify this? How do we justify it? Borrowing to consume, it means we cannot repay it in any time. So for me, just borrowing and consuming is nothing to talk about. You're talking about wages. In other jurisdictions, the wages should have been frozen. Now we are still adding on the wages, the NAPCOP and what have you. They're all adding to the wages. The IMF in 2014 advised the country to freeze the wages and stop unemployment of people to the public sector. That was one of the conditions set by IMF when the country went there in 2014. And I was thinking that to be very prudent, we need to look at the wages and the salaries, because 60% to 70% goes into, you're left with nothing.
But Doc, somebody would disagree with you and say, where are your facts? What is the basis for you saying that we've used 60% to pay salaries and wages?
Oh, it has been said all along that majority of the revenues go into paying salaries and wages. So we are left with, if you care, we are left with less than 8 billion for capital expenditure. We are servicing paying salaries, and we are servicing the debt and interest. We are left with little for capital expenditure. And if we go on the way we are going, we will live in abject poverty for the rest of God knows.
My question has to do with the 750 million euro bond. Somebody listening to us or watching us will disagree with you and say, where did Dr. Atuahene get his facts from?
I got it from Paul Adam in 2015, African Research Institute. Paul Adam, 2015, African Research Institute. I'm quoting him direct. It is here. He did the work and found out that there were promises that were made. You know, when we make too much electoral promises without even knowing where we're going to get the money from. And at that time, the change of government, part of the money went to pay wages. If you go, you can check. Paul Adams, 2015, African Research Institute. It's clearly there. Anybody can go and read. I never wrote it. I read from that.
So, Doc, we have a situation where we are spending a lot on recurrent expenditure. I was looking at the numbers of capital expenditure, and it's been dwindling marginally. It's been going down.
Yeah.
And I asked myself, so this trap we are in is still going to continue because we'll have to borrow to finance these projects, and the cycle continues. You
know, we need to have a cost-cutting measures. I mean, I just want to make a joke of it. In 2014, when there was the, I think 2014 World Cup, isn't it?
Yeah.
We spent so much to support us to go and watch, isn't it? And we are doing the same thing. Where does that money come from? It comes from taxes. So are you taking taxes to go and support football, putting a lot of people going to stay there, and the budget that the sports minister said, it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. We are living in affluence. We should be able to cut costs to barest minimum until we get to maybe 50% of the debt GDP ratio. Today we are 59. We are almost 0.9, 0.8. We get to the distress point. Now we are the highest distress. 60 as set by the World Bank and the IMF is 60. When we get there, we are a distressed country. And nobody wants to deal with a distressed country. Nobody.
Look, from your submissions, one would say all hope is lost. Is there anything that can be done? You have mentioned cost cutting as one.
Freezing of public sector wages.
Doc, the question everybody asks is the political willpower to do it. We know the solutions. Why don't we just do it?
You have political willpower to borrow, but you don't have political willpower to cut your cost. And then we are in a dire straits. We're not going to get out of it. Because you see, the issue coming up is very dangerous. Formerly, we were borrowing from the multilateral and the bilateral donors. They can give you a debt relief. But if you're borrowing from commercial sector, our debt structure has now changed.
Yes, true.
And it makes it more dangerous. It happened in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka borrowed money like that. And when they borrowed money, it defaulted. The Chinese went there and took over their running of the assets. And it's happening in Argentina. There is a law in Argentina when they defaulted. in those companies, those institutions went there and seized a lot of things. So you see, we are getting towards to that point that we should slow down the borrowing, and begin to see what are the innovative ways. Let me tell you one of the innovative ways. I learned from the former World Bank president in Ghana, the resident manager. Before he left, he made a very, very solid point, and I thought we would have adopted it. Although Dr. Bawumia has written about it in 2010, I have the book in my office here. He said that digitizing the formal sector through addressing system.
Yeah.
He said it. Dr. Bawumia has said it 2010. I've read it. If you digitize the formal system by even addressing system, the World Bank, if every house in the whole country was paying a property rate of even 5 cedis, count it. Is it not better than putting a luxury tax on a vehicle only to go there for people to rise against and you drop it? You can't experiment with taxes. Yes. You cannot. And this is the second time. The first time it was personal incomes. He shoot the personal incomes and then later on he withdrew it. He has no empirical evidence of what he does. It comes to him that more emotionally he does that. I believe in tax system. In tax, you got to have a try and tested approach. Because once you fail, it becomes something else. The president said, the resident manager, he said, why don't we look at digital? And recently I heard Dr. Bawumia saying that all the address, a fantastic idea. Fantastic idea. Because if every house in this country, village, you are paying 10 cedis or 5 cedis, do you know the amount of revenue we generate?
It will be
huge. Let us talk about these, is it identification or what do you call it?
The national identification system.
Let me tell you, they should take it serious and take their time, like we do census. Go from house to house. Not the way they are running around it. They go there, the systems have failed. They go there, the systems are not working. Let me tell you, in my area, 50% hasn't registered. But they have finished and gone. We have tried it before. President Kufuor time, when Professor Dumont was the chairman of the... We tried it because instead of taking our time, as if we are competing with somebody, let us do it systematically, do it proactively, understand it, and make everybody come on the net.
Right, so that was Dr. Richmond Atuahene sharing his insights and his sentiments on the mid-year review that was presented on Monday by the finance minister. And you can see a lot of good stuff there. He says borrowing may leave us in abject poverty. I'm going to cut straight to the studio and ask my guest, Nana Osei-Bonsu, who is the CEO of the Private Enterprise Federation, that's PEF, what exactly he makes of Dr. Atuahene's comments, and we'll set the ball rolling from there. So, Nana, you've seen a very interesting Dr. Atuahene sharing his insights there.
Very, very interesting indeed.
What jumps at you from his submissions?
The continuous borrowing. One thing, I agree with almost everything he said, except capping remunerations, capping payroll, because people don't earn enough decent salaries. And the cost of living is so high, you cannot afford to cap that. We have to find ways, either reduce the burden of the employment at the public sector and allow private sector to grow and absorb these things. But capping is not, to me, the answer. But everything else, the excess borrowings, look at what does we do with the borrowing? What happens to the enormous amount of monies that come in? Statutory payments, interest payments, salaries, and we're left to zero. So we have to find ways to stretch out and open up in a way that we can earn returns on our borrowings. We're not. We're now borrowing to consume, as he said. And that is why I said I agree with him. And we have to find ways to do things that would replenish the economy, to grow the economy. Who is going to be the support of the economy? The private sector. Because in the budget review, the minister said there were shortfalls in taxes. Who pay taxes? Not government, private sector. So if you don't capacitate the private sector to become profitable and then pay the taxes that is due to allow you to execute your programs, obviously you're cutting your nose to spite your face. And that's why we think that government should be working with the private sector to find ways for them to be profitable. In our local language, we said if you have a chicken that lays the egg, do you kill it? No, you fatten it, so there are more eggs, and that's what we think should be happening.
Okay. In the mid-year review, the finance minister mentioned he was very heavy on two key areas, the energy sector and the financial sector. We'll come to the financial sector at the latter part of our discussion. But on the energy sector, we saw the introduction of some taxes, the increase in levies in the energy sector levies, and most importantly, the most recent development with regards to PDS, ECG, and our power sector. You spoke about private sector, Nana, and I asked myself, sitting here, I would assume that this conundrum, I'll put it that way, that's going on with the PDS and ECG, and even all moves by government to renegotiate the take or pay to take and pay, etc., is going to affect, one, power consumption in the country or power supply in the country, and two, what I'm very concerned about, future investments in the power sector. What do you make of all this?
You see, the pricing for power in the country is very steep. And if you recall, I think a year ago or something, that we reduced pricing by 30%. We cautioned government at the time, because it's going to come back to haunt you. This is not something that the system could absorb, but you're making an artificial reduction that definitely, when it comes back to haunt you, pay twice as much. Now we have this unfortunate incident of PDS and ECG. How did we get here? Because of ineffective, inefficient deficiency in the ECG that resulted in this. Now we say that PDS is the problems, and instead of addressing it, we hand it over back to ECG, unacceptable.
So you would disagree with?
Oh no, I agree with them that we have to correct whatever errors in that arrangement.
Yes.
And then bring back private sector, 51% local private sector directive and drive and leadership in that delivery. Now, we have institutions like the pension funds, we have institutions like the insurance industry. They can become part of the PDS instead of what the 51% was now. But the question is, we can have a temporary arrangement for ECG to handle what the situation is until we can address it, but not to hand over back to ECG, because ECG is the reason why where we are.
Government has given indication that all things being equal, they might complete this probe, in inverted commas, in a matter of 30 days. And all things being equal, if I'm sure things are found to be what they are supposed to be, then perhaps it might go back into the hands of PDS, I beg your pardon. Worst case scenario, what if is there a case that it can't go back into the hands of PDS?
No, it should go back, except that you can have another group of the 51%. It doesn't have to be the same investors who possibly did not have the master and the resources to do what they did, the malfeasance that occurred. But this, it's so unfortunate that a country like ours couldn't do our due diligence to the point where we have to do 4 times before we detected malfeasance or some kind of fraudulent activities. It's unfortunate that. But that notwithstanding, what we have now found out, let's address it. Let's open up. These investors don't have the capacity to do. Let's open up and bring some other interested and institutional capacities that can absorb the 51% and move on. But do not, under any condition, give it back to ECG. Okay. They're the reasons why we're here.
Okay. Let's move into another area of our discussion on the taxes that were introduced. And prior to the year 2017, in a run-up to the elections, even in 2016, the government touted an ambition of shifting from taxation to production.
Correct.
One may argue that does not necessarily mean that taxes will be completely wiped out, but however, due to their pro-private sector background, they would find a way of putting in taxes without it burdening the private sector, which we so love and call the engine of growth.
Yes.
Now, we have some on the petroleum sector. We all drive vehicles, or we all use public transport in one way or the other. We are all sitting in vehicles. Then we have one on communications. We all use data. We all use mobile phones. Sitting at the top of the Private Enterprise Federation, Nana, what do you glean from this? Are we heading backwards, or this is just a stopgap measure for government to bring in some revenue?
Well, government needs money. It got to get the revenue. There are revenue shortfalls basically because we're not doing the right things to collect. We're not doing the right things for private sector to become profitable and pay more. But this kind of taxes, as much as they are uncomfortable, is spreading the burden, not only on the back of the domestic private sector, on the back of businesses, but this is the consumers. These are pass-throughs that consumers are also going to feel the pinch. I don't think consumers, well, they may let the government pay one way or the other, but that is another method of, spreading the pain. Fine. But do we find ways, can we find ways to address these shortfalls in the taxes? We have a group of businesses, foreign, having enormous tax exemption. And the president is quoted, and I quote him verbally when we were in Berlin, and he said, we're losing about 2.2 billion US dollars in tax exemptions. What have we done about it? We know where they are. We can go and review those we granted tax exemptions to find out, do they still have to enjoy the tax exemptions? Their businesses are viable, they're making money, and repatriating the profits home, putting pressure on the volatility of our currency. So this tax exemption group, what have we done about it? We're talking about opening up the taxable base, the informal sector. How much are we going to get out of the informal sector? The threshold of taxes, most of them will fall below. But we have a targeted group who are enjoying tax benefits, tax exemptions, and repatriating these profits home. Let's go and review. Have we done any review of our tax exemptions? I'm a strong supporter of tax exemption, but targeted to influence some of these sectors. It's not a blanket tax exemption that you grant to A to Z or A and B when they come in and they ask for it. No, we have to make sure that, yes, it's going to affect the sectors and it's going to have a collateral impact on the other sectors so we can grow our economy. The essence of tax exemption is to see ways where we don't have the internal resources, internal capacity, and bring these people in to do that, technology transfer and all. We made some mistakes previously. We should not continue to make that mistake. So the tax shortfalls, we can find ways to address that without spreading all that to the average consumer who is earning 600 Ghana cedis a month to, for the sin taxes, for the trotros, for the petroleum, which is going to be spread out to everybody. So we can find ways to reduce that burden by looking at and examining the tax exemptions that we have granted over the years.
Okay, Nana, I want to pick you up on the exemptions before I come to the informal sector. One would argue that using and reviewing these exemptions will stifle private sector development. Is that a sound argument to make, that as soon as you start looking at this, businesses that come and are supposed to help us with this technological transfer that you mentioned will look at Ghana and say, yikes, I don't want to come in? Do you think it's a sound argument to make?
Well, I mean, we should not be scared to tell people we're not going to give the store away to you because you want to come and do business and take the profits home whilst the government is starving for resources. So we should be bold enough and say, okay, there are targets, there are sectors that we're going to allow tax exemptions, but there are sectors that we don't. Somebody is coming to build a luxury hotel, 200-room conference hall. Why do we have to give them tax exemptions? If they're building something that we don't have in our system, you glorify that with tax exemption to make it viable so they can continue to do business. But don't forget, any tax exemption that you grant, especially when you have locals in that sector, they're competing against the locals. I'll give you a scenario where the foreign is coming with a cost of money, 3% from their environment. The local is 30%. You see the disparity, 27% against the local. Then they come and enjoy tax exemption of 25%. So 52% competitive advantage over locals. How do we grow to become competitive? So we look at it, the tax exemption, as I said, targeted to sectors we don't have, where we need technology transfer, where we need the technical expertise, where we have to see that it has a collateral impact on the other sectors. Energy. We need energy every which ways. We're now talking about industrialization. How are we going to make profits on industrialization when the energy cost is unaffordable? And we have to find ways to reduce and diversify our energy production mix. And if we do that, the local private sector can now look at, you add the processing, capital expenditures that the locals can do. Where are the resources to do? How do we take advantage of those things? So the tax exemption should not be the key barometer for a potential investor coming in and say, okay, when I go to Ghana, I have to enjoy it. Yes, because they want huge profit margins. No businessman will tell you that I want to sacrifice my profit margins for the benefit of that country. No.
Okay. This is the business edition of PM Express. My name is Philip Nanfuru, and my guest, Nana Osei-Bonsu, is the CEO of the Private Enterprise Federation. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back. Right, thanks for staying with us. Before we went to the break, we were looking at the tax regime in the country and how it's, what are some of the possible impacts on the private sector. And we now want to look at the informal sector we speak about the most. I'm sure you've heard about statistics where just a few of us are paying most of the taxes, particularly the income taxes in the country. And we have the informal sector where we have most of our artisans, plumbers, carpenters, etc., not paying direct taxes to government and rather paying indirect taxes from the products and services they use. Now we have the national identification cards which are being rolled out. Some argue we should take our time and really ensure that it's rolled out properly. Then we can use this as a pathway into looking at the informal sector. We start identifying them, then we start putting taxes on them. We can link the NIA system to the GRA system, customs, etc. Then we have a network system where we can track everyone, particularly those who are out of the tax bracket, the informal sector especially. Can this work? Will this work? And how long will it take to work? Nana?
Interesting. Yes, we want everybody who is making money to pay their fair share of the taxes. We have to find ways to address it. Have you gone to the airport of late?
Yeah.
You see people bringing huge sums of goods. If that person gets to the custom, he has to show his tax ID. He has to demonstrate that he had paid his taxes. Because if you can afford about 200,000 Ghana cedis worth of goods, then obviously you have some wealth and you're making some money, so let's see your tax liability. If they haven't, you seize the goods at the airport, let them go clear with tax clearance certificate from GRA and then come and clear the goods. These are measures that we can put together. When we talk about the informal sector, yes, it's huge. 86.2% of our own entire economy is on the informal sector. How do we get them to pay their fair share of the taxes? Some of them are oblivious of their tax liability. We've done a thorough review of taxes and on the back of private sector. Some of them don't even know where their tax office is. We have to lower the tax language. That is a very necessary, important element that is coming up, where the GRA on their own reform is coming up with ITAS, the Integrated Tax Assessment and Payment System. It allows private sector to aggregate their business records. You know, without business records, you cannot ascertain your tax liability. So IRS realizing that said, okay, we're going to give you a portal that is on the IT that you can aggregate your business records. And on the back of that, at the press of a button, at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, it generates your tax liability. This is a welcome opportunity where the public sector is working with private sector to make sure that everybody pays their fair share. These are some of the things. But then the language in the tax requirements is over and above people's heads. Don't forget, the level of education of some of our businesses is not at the point where they can talk about integrated and sophistication and all that. Let's lower the burden. Let's lower the language so they can definitely do their self-assessment, and they can do that within the confines of their home. Why would I want to pay a consultant to assess my taxes for me to pay taxes? That's double whammy. Nobody in their right mind will want to do that. So we have to find ways to lessen and reduce the cost of tax administration whilst we increasing the opportunity for voluntary tax compliance. And this is what we found, that when a lot of people become aware of their responsibility and have the opportunity to understand and appreciate, they will pay the taxes. And we're working with GRA, and we've been here before talking about ITAPs and all the other things that GRA is putting together. They're rolling that out since, I think, April, and a greater percentage of public dissemination and education was going to come on the back of that. So we expect taxes to increase. We expect that government will also push the other button as to how we create the resource opportunities for private sector to do business and become profitable.
And a final one before we jump into the financial sector. What will you advise private businesses, particularly, to do in this time to keep their head above the water, given the recent tax measures? What advice will you give them?
Well, the advice is to look within your cost structure, because the profit margin definitely is not going to come overnight, but you have the opportunity to reduce your taxes. Sometimes businesses overlook some of the savings that they can do, energy savings, some of their cost savings, and their bank accounts. You borrow, and this morning I was talking to some international organizations that we talk about. Somebody goes to the bank, he needs money. He borrows, and he can pay the debt in 6 months. The bank stretches it to 2 years. He says, oh, the bank says 2 years, I'm going to pay 2 years. But meantime, he has money that's sitting in his bank account doing nothing, not on not on time deposit that he's making money. So if he had used the money to pay off the debt, he wouldn't incur additional interest costs. But because they don't understand, and then the type of facility that they take from the institutions, sometimes it's overburdensome on them. So the cost structure is what I look at. We advise businesses, let's review your entire cost structure. And if we can cut corners, you definitely would increase your profit margins.
Okay. Then financial sector, our playground, or your playground. So, finance minister says, and his sentiments resonate with the governor's sentiments. He says, banking sector is well capitalized, depositors' funds have been saved, lending rates are dropping, cost of borrowing is dropping, the banking sector is strong, and at the end of it, we now know that the overall cost of that cleanup will put us in the region of 21 billion Ghana cedis, or $3 to $4 billion. Nana, 21 billion, that's a lot of money. That could have gone into a plethora of schools, hospitals, and roads. Do you think we've come to the end of this banking sector, which some argue, because the banks hold 85% of the assets in the financial sector, if we solve the banking issue, we've solved all the other issues?
Nope. The banking sector is not the financial sector. It's part of the financial sector. So once you resolve the issues in the banking side, you haven't resolved the issues across board in all the sectors in the financial industry. The 21 billion will recoup some of the investment, obviously, because this is just to boost the confidence in the system so people don't run on the banks. People, just last week, I took a tour of some financial institution banks, and they were almost like ghost towns. Why? I asked them, they said, well, people are not coming. You don't want people to lose confidence in the system. Those that receive the bailout money should find ways to make sure that the depositors get access to their money. This is one of the constraining factors, that either the receivers don't know what they're doing or they haven't applied it properly. So addressing the banking sector, that is fantastic. But let me give you an example. You resolve GN Bank, from GN Bank to GN Savings and Loans, but go around the country. The notice board on any place is GN Bank. Why haven't we completed that transaction? Why do we allow them to demonstrate that they're GN Bank when they're GN Savings and Loans? So we don't complete the transactions. We don't complete the bailout. We don't complete the restructuring. But the other part of the coin is the asset managers, investment companies.
And before you delve into that, there's a story from Bloomberg that just resonates what you're saying. And the title of the story is Ghana probes fund managers for $921 million in risky investments.
Wait. You said risky investments or fraudulent investments?
The story says risky investments.
Okay.
And it's by Mozart Chau. He's with Bloomberg, Ghana. And essentially, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, is auditing a number of fund managers, asset managers, like you said, for a number of risky investments they have made. To my mind, when you mention risky investment, as a fund manager, you are supposed to take some risk,
Yes.
but at the same time, ensure that you have enough on hand to honor the obligations of your investors or your depositors. So, what do you make of this?
There is no risk-free investment. So when they say risk investment, I want to know whether, or in a level of 1 to 10, what are we assigning to? You're talking about 9.5 risk investments? Fine. But we're not talking about this risk investment. We're talking about fraudulent activities on the part of the people that control the microfinances, control the investment companies, that they use people's investments at their piggy bank to enrich themselves. And this is where SEC failed. SEC 2018 May came out that XYZ companies have problems, so you got to be careful you don't invest in them or do. You're warning the public, but you have the authority at that time to suspend their license so that they couldn't do business and do a forensic audit. After the fact, when the train had left the station, now you're going to do forensic. There are lots of businesses whose monies have been locked up in this institution. They run into billions. We're talking about 921. That is, it pales under what people are money.
That's about 5 billion Ghana cedis.
Yes, and these are the institutions that some of the businesses had confidence and put their monies in. They can't get their monies out. And Bank of Ghana and SEC license some of these institutions. So they have a responsibility to make sure that what they've done in the banking system, to make sure that the asset managers pay back, or Bank of Ghana and SEC pay back to the depositors while they address the issues. Because they cannot let people hang on, hoping that tomorrow. Because I had a meeting with the SEC, and I said, what are we doing? We're going to do forensic audit. After the fact, where were they when these guys were operating? We have institutions that have issued checks to potential investors whose investment had matured for the checks to bounce. Are you kidding me? How much can you allow these things to go on? We have institutions where people's investment had matured since December. They can't get their money. We have individuals who are looking now to use their money for health reasons. They can't get their money. So if the minister says that that is wrong, he's only bailed out the banking system, not the financial system. Because the asset managers, the license by SEC and Bank of Ghana, still holding on the savings and loans. Go to them and find out. Somebody wants to withdraw 6,000 Ghana cedis of their own money, they give him 200.
Nana, one will make the argument that once the banks are bailed out, savings and loans, finance houses, etc., hold their operational accounts with banks. These fund managers also...
I disagree. Don't go there. They don't hold their accounts at banks. They use the money. Evidence abound how they misuse the funds that were, given to them on the back of their potential investments. If they were held in financial institutions, hallelujah, everybody can tap into that. I have XYZ money in this bank or that bank, so now that you have been resourced by Bank of Ghana, make sure that you give the money to us and we can pay the depositors their matured assets. No, most of them were abused. And we have where a banking system, a financial institution, they're doing business off their books, not reporting to Bank of Ghana. Yeah. So nobody could track that. The forensic audit will give evidence to that. We have been privileged to see some of these things where, as I said, people were using that to enrich themselves, riding high in Mercedes and Jaguars and in the communities. People think that, hey, this guy is wealthy. So, and they're still walking around. No prosecution, no punitive measures and all. So this is where the system is failing. And we got to be careful that we don't allow that to continue, because people's confidence in that system is going to haunt us tomorrow. If I lose my money in a bank, you think I've ever put my money again in a banking system? No. I put it on my pillow. And I give another industry opportunity, the thieves, opportunity to also enrich themselves.
Nana, quick one here. Somewhere in the 90s, is it 90s or... Let me just say, before I was born, Ghana tried the Non-Performing Assets Recovery Trust.
Thank you.
And now Nigeria has the AMCON from 2010, where they go and buy the bad debt of these institutions, banks particularly, clean their books, and then an institution becomes responsible for going out there and recovering what is lost.
Thank you.
Do we need something like this rather than the receivers that we are using now under the banking law? Do we need something like this back again?
December 21st, 2016, we hosted, Private Enterprise Federation hosted the president-elect to tell us what he has for the future for the private sector. In that report that I actually read in behalf of the industry, we told the government, we asked and requested the president to set up an asset recovery institution to take away all these bulging portfolio of non-performing loans from the banking system, clean them up, and leave them lean to do their business. We offered that because we knew what was happening. But that has not happened. Now, later on down the road, we bring different receivers. Do they have the capacity? Were they part of the system? The auditors, the accountants, and all. These are part of the same group that are being asked to be the receivers for this institution. So we haven't done what needs to be done. Because we had a pre-notice that the things in the system were not working right. And there are ways that asset recovery is not a new thing. Setting aside, buying down the non-performing loans to maybe minuscule amount, 10% discounted or 20%, it can be done. And we asked that. I can bring that documentation, I can publish it, that we asked the president-elect, this is what you can do to clean up the system. That didn't happen. Until now, it's too late. But the efforts in the banking system are in the right direction, no two ways about that. But the other part of the financial sector is what needs to be done. Because unless we do that, we just cut our nose to spite our face, do the banking, and then they let the savings and loans and the asset managers hemorrhage to a point where people's businesses will collapse.
We're taking a quick break right here. This is the business edition of PM Express. My name is Philip Nanfuru, and my guest, Nana Osei-Bonsu, who is the CEO of Private Enterprise Federation. A lot going on in the financial sector. Do stay tuned. Right, you're welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Before we went on the break, Nana Osei-Bonsu was telling us how they had advised or recommended to government to set up an asset recovery. And asset recovery means essentially if a bank has bad loans or non-performing loans, that institution goes in there, buys up all the bad loans, gives the bank something, and then the bank's slate is cleaned.
Correct.
So the bank has a lower non-performing loan ratio, lower non-performing loans, etc., and they run efficiently and better. And then that institution will now go and look for those who owe these banks the loan. So if you know you are defaulting on your loan, then you should be scared or worried about it. And Nigeria is practicing this, and is working pretty well for them. But how come this recommendation was never adhered to, Nana?
Well, I think in the back of a new government coming in, the competitive demands on the back of on the president and the team with various programs and all possibly overwhelmed the point to the where they possibly missed the boat or missed what our recommendations were and didn't take that into consideration. But that notwithstanding, we still had opportunity to review what was going on, which I think that the supervised institutions and Bank of Ghana and SEC had that absolute responsibility to do, and they failed to do. You know, so it's not a back of the political leadership, but it's on the back of the professional leadership that failed the system.
Nana, we are winding down on our discussion. Very fruitful one, I must add. And what else in terms of advice to government, advice to the private sector, do you have to share with us?
You see, government tax revenues come out of the back of private sector profit margins. So you need a private sector, a robust, performing, competitive, rich, profitable private sector. If they do that, government is not going to be missing the entire revenue base that or projections that they make. In private sector's biggest challenge in our system is absence of long-term pool of funding. We all depend on the short-term banking, which are not suitable to most of the activities private sector does. We don't have a viable pool since when ADIF was merged into Exim Bank. So what we had made this recommendation 2 years in a row to the ministries before budget, that let's extend what we call the SP, Special Petroleum Levy. It's coming to an end December 31st, 2019. Previously, it was to end 2017, and they extended it to 2019. We had made a recommendation. This is taxes paid by private sector. Private sector pays it, says, okay, continue with it. Don't give the sunset, don't collapse it. But aggregate that money and set it aside for private sector use as a long-term pool of funding. This is a bread and butter for private sector. Pool of funding, resources to enable us to do our businesses with a patient capital that can allow us to become profitable. So my recommendation is don't disregard that, because private sector has no other avenues to turn to except where we can aggregate long-term pool of funding to allow us, especially in agriculture, and then the extractive industry that we want to bring into the industrialization. So this is where our advice goes to the minister and the government, that extend the special petroleum levy and let private sector aggregate. Don't go use it for any other purpose. Don't go use it for any
We hope so.
Yeah, don't go use it for any other purpose. Extend it for 2 years and aggregate the quantum for private sector use.
We have a couple more months to the end of the year. Then we enter an election year. We are already seeing large expenditures on the back of our growing security demands, as the minister puts it, and these energy sector issues. Generally, Nana, in the next 6 months, do you think all is well and good for the private sector as the year draws to a close?
My fear is we've always been subject ourselves to the erratic expenditure pre-election and election years. We hope and pray that this time around, because we're just coming back winning ourselves from the IMF, statutory engagement, we don't want to go back there. Because to me, it's a disgrace for a country to go to IMF and say, overlook our shoulders and tell us what to do, when even the prescription they give us, we have to execute it. We can discipline ourselves. So let's discipline ourselves this time around and make sure that the world watching us doesn't think that we're not capable of managing our own business. And we need Bretton Woods institutions to just tell us what to do. As a sovereign state, that is not right for us. And
just before I draw down the curtain, the luxury vehicle tax. I can see you are you are now relieved of that cost of paying that extra.
You see, the essence of that was, where did that come from? Why do you make such big mistakes? Luxury. Somebody brings a pickup to do business. The pickup engine capacity is 3.5. You said because of engine capacity, it's a luxury vehicle, so you're going to tax it to excess. What is he going to do with the business? The business is not going to make money. So that was a wrong thing from the beginning, and it's just glad that and happy that it's been withdrawn. We realized, and I like a listening government when they see that, well, the people don't like it, it's not right, so we withdraw, we apologize, and we say we're sorry.
Because Dr. Atuahene shared your exact sentiment. He said this tax shouldn't have even been put. We should have done proper empirical evidence to see if indeed it will give us what we need. Yes. And that's that. Nana, I want to say a big thank you for your time.
Grateful.
Nana Osei-Bonsu, CEO of the Private Enterprise Federation, PEF, and my name, Philip Nanfuri. This has been the business edition of PM Express. Do have a good evening.